listeners, wherever you are in the world. This is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Good morning, everyone, and happy Tuesday. Welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I am the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the founder and host of Blended Podcast, and the founder of the Blended Pledge as well. And I am super excited to be here with you today. I am live from Atlanta, Georgia, because I am here for the Women in Supply Chain Forum. But not only that, I'm excited because we've got Prakash here, and he's got such an amazing story. He's got such a journey in supply chain, and I can't wait to hear his thoughts on a variety of things that we're going to be talking about today. And my apologies up front. I am getting over a cold, so coughs and things like that may come up in the conversation. But let's get to what's happening at Let's Talk Supply Chain. So we have a brand new episode for you wherever you listen to the show: Apple, Spotify, YouTube. It's episode 434. And we're talking about synchronizing your supply chain execution with Tiffany from Blue Yonder. Now, if you don't know what that means, if you're having a hard time synchronizing your supply chain, this episode is for you. So go and check it out. Tiffany shares a whole bunch of great insights about how you can synchronize your supply chain and so much more. So go check that out wherever you listen to the show. All right. Then on November 21st at 1 p.m. Eastern, I am doing a webinar alongside Givens Transportation, BlackBerry Radar, Splice, and SiteTrax. And we're going to be talking about coordinated asset management. Now, we've put the link in the comments for you. Go and sign up to be part of the conversation. Can't wait to see you there. This is going to be a lively discussion. If you've met any of these people, you know they've got a lot to bring to the table. All right, now we've got live events that are happening on Let's Talk Supply Chain. So Relex goes live tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern, and they are talking about the key to supply chain excellence. Excuse me, I told you that was going to happen. So go and click the attend button because I will send you the recording even if you can't attend live. This is going to be a great one. They're talking about demand sensing in retail. Then on Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, we've got LogTech Live with Eric Johnson, and he's talking about visibility. Now, we've all been talking about visibility for a very long time, but he's got Shipio coming on the show to talk about what that actually means for you and how you can master it. Again, click the attend button. We'll send you the link. We've got Supply Chain Unfiltered. It's happening Wednesday, November 20th at 10 a.m. Eastern. Christine Barnhart with special guest Tom Campbell. And they're talking about powering value-added logistics in today's market. So check that out. And then the same day at 11:30 Eastern, I've got a brand new episode of On the Margins with MVK and Randy Miller. And we're talking about how to thrive through cost cutting and corporate changes. So again, click the attend button, join us. We want to see you there. And it's going to be a great discussion. Excuse me. Sorry. All right. So the Monthly Hustle is my LinkedIn newsletter. And this month, we're talking about embracing the journey, why the paths are never straight. So if you want to learn a little bit more about my journey and how I've been able to navigate some of the challenges, go and check this out, the latest edition. Give me 1 second. All right, I didn't want to do that to you again, but cannot help it today. We've also got the top 5 books for professionals starting in supply chain. Go and check that out. We've put the link in the comments. And last but not least, in-person events. I'm here at the Women in Supply Chain Forum. Manifest is happening in February, and then we've got Home Delivery World in May. All right, now it's time to bring up our guest for today. Hello, Prakash.
Hey, good evening.
Woo, I am not having a good time with this cough.
Yeah, it seems to be going around at the moment.
My apologies about that. All right. So, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining me. Why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Prakash Radhakrishnan. I'm a fulfillment specialist for a global logistics firm, managing one of their projects.
Awesome. I love that. And right now you're in India.
Yes, I am. I just got in this morning.
So what are you doing in India?
So I'm here actually to meet a group called Sati SSN in relation to some work I do outside of not being part of the supply chain, which is bringing more awareness, especially within the corporate world, about disabilities and more importantly, caregiving. So us as carers, how do we show up within the supply chain industry and many other industries?
Well, and I think that's such an important topic, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the show. Because when we show up at work, right, we're not just supply chain professionals, we're holistically people. And we all have different challenges, strained relationships, things like that. And I think it's important that we talk about ourselves holistically so that people can really understand where we're coming from. And that really helps in the art of communication. So I'm so glad that you're bringing your story. And we're going to be talking about that in just a minute coming up on the show. All right, let's talk about the poll of the week. So the question I asked you, how valuable is further education in advancing a supply chain career? Now, 48% of you said essential for growth, 43% of you said depends on the role, and 8% said not necessary. Prakash, what do you think about this?
It's for me personally, it's 100% necessary. Every time we're growing, we're developing, or we're trying to attain to that role we've always dreamed of, we can only get there by experience, and part of that experience is theoretical experience. But finding that middle ground of implementing our theory that we've learned with the real everyday practical work.
Absolutely. And I think, when we think about education, though, I think it can come in a lot of different forms. A lot of people think they need to go get their master's. A lot of people think that they need to go get this and that, and it'll further them in their career. And it could for some, depending on what they want to do in the industry. But education can look a lot differently for everybody. And I think we continually need to educate ourselves because things are changing all the time. But I think we need to understand that it looks differently. It's not necessarily that traditional education.
Correct. Completely agree.
And so we've got some comments on here. Scott Moody says, on the operational side, as in boots on the ground in a DC or warehouse, experience and certifications with leadership skills are essential. I agree with that. We definitely need a lot more training when it comes to leadership and managerial roles, especially, right? Joshua says, education is a great way to bolster your experience and drive, but is no substitution for experience. And doesn't that ring true for supply chain in general? I think we all need to have as much experience as possible in a variety of different roles to be able to continually improve and move forward in the supply chain. What do you think about that? Because you've had a long career in supply chain.
Yeah, just looking back at it, it's actually longer than I realized. I think, yeah, I mean, the education part is definitely extremely valuable. It's part of something which I feel I enjoy doing. Not the examination part, but the learning, the different concepts. But like some of your polls have said, it's boots on the ground, the actual real world experience. You can theorize any experience connotations that you want to, but real world experience, being in the warehouse when such things happen, or understanding why air freight shipments have come in late, or a sea container has come in late. It may be sitting at the port, but why is it taking time? And it's not just one mode of transportation that affects a supply chain. It could be multimodal. So shipment going by air, sea, road, just to get to the distribution center. I work in a center where we are constantly relying on train transportation as well as road freight coming in from Europe. Now, if there's delays with that due to the weather, due to any number of things, it has a knock-on effect. Now, these things are real-world experiences that you can't really document within a thesis or within a educational platform.
That is so true. But also, understanding the microcosms around supply chain and what it's actually going to do if you change something over here could impact something down the line or up the line in a variety of different ways. And that really only comes with experience as well, especially in supply chain. Now's the time to give us a bit of a market update. So I ask my guests this question every single time because it's interesting to see what everybody's going through in different parts of the supply chain and the questions that you're asking, or maybe your customers are asking. And coming from a 3PL background, working with a luxury retailer, what's top of mind for them? What are the things that you are concentrating on, maybe for the last 8 weeks of 2024, but then really looking to drive forward in 2025?
So one of the big things, I mean, it's been spoken about for the last couple of years, but my current role at the moment, they're really focusing on sustainability, driving the current day-to-day metrics to achieve their goals, both quarterly, 6 monthly, and yearly, but also seeing how we can bring an air of sustainability to what we do, both daily as well as overall operations. I think sustainability in all areas, from the different types of vehicles. Now, we've changed some of our vehicles to electric vehicles, especially if they're doing local runs rather than your generic uh, diesel or petrol vehicles. That's one part of it. But also looking at the packaging that we're using, the packaging we're sourcing it from. Within a distribution center, we use a lot of shrink wrap, bubble wrap, those sort of things. But it's not just about how we use it, it's also how we dispose of it when freight comes into the warehouse. The
Yes.
shrink wrapper gets taken off, it gets thrown in the bin. Now, is that the most ideal thing? Yes, it creates more waste. But is it sustainable waste? Can we reuse that plastic somewhere else? Just like we reuse pallets all the time. Some pallets can be cut straight off a cargo freighter and going straight onto a container ship. So that level of sustainability is something that I'm really pushing and driving to try and find solutions where we can not only implement it within our day-to-day operations currently in what I do, but also see if we can roll it out across the branch into different areas and really start impacting that word where sustainability is so important. I think because global supply chain, 3PLs, 4PLs, 2PLs, the full spectrum, we have such a global footprint, yet there's not really much of a conversation about really harnessing the sustainability. And I think if we can really knock into that, we can actually create a sizable tangent shift globally, which can only benefit our generation, the next generation, and the beautiful planet that we live in.
I agree with you. Now, next week, our guest for Thoughts and Coffee, we're going to be talking about ESG and compliance as well. I know today we're going to be talking about responsible sourcing, but they are really passionate about ESG compliance, how we bring that into the forefront of our businesses to really drive that impact forward. And I know sustainability has kind of taken a back seat really in the last year with a lot of the costs going up, inflation, things like that. But we need to make sure that we've got champions within those organizations to be able to help drive that forward and keep it top of mind for everybody. Because you're right, it's going to take all of us, and supply chain has a very large impact into sustainability and what happens with packaging. And packaging is only one part of it, right? There's so many other things that we can think about when that happens. Now, if you are watching and listening, I want to hear where you are watching and listening from. If you've got any questions for Prakash, please let us know. We've only got another 15 minutes. We've got a lot to cover in those 15 minutes. So make sure that you write those down, put them in the comments, because we'd love to hear from you. Now, I want to give a shout out to Davin. We've also got Raza and Charlotte over on my personal LinkedIn. Charlotte already has a question for you. How has working within the need for sustainability impacted your view of how you do things?
Massively. It's something that just came up while you were reading the previous quote, is that we fill these bins up every day. So we're looking at trying to reduce the plastic, reduce the sticky labels, the paper on the back of it. But it also means that I'm more mindful at home, but also while I'm driving home or while I'm commuting. So I've done a lot of traveling this year by air for work, as well as personally. But it's also looking at that and saying, do I need to travel that much? because it's using up fuel. It has a lot of other connotations. Can I just do a web conference exactly like we're doing now? But I
Right.
think also looking at it from work, so the bigger the organization, the bigger the footprint is of how we're using products, but also how we're disposing of it. Yes, it may go into a waste field, but if that gets incinerated, it goes into a furnace that gets burnt. Do we really need to do that, or can we potentially reuse some of the plastic or the backing of the paper, the sheets, in other areas, maybe as stuffing for some of the products, uh, or even as lining for any other areas in the business. Marketing, I know from time to time, are always looking at different ideas to help create more sustainability within their industry and their remit. So it's also working with other departments within the business, but having these open, frank conversations. And for me, Sarah, as you know from some of the interactions we've had in the past, collaboration of every single level is absolutely important. If one of us or one group of us, say myself in operations, is only talking about sustainability and improving uh, the dynamics of how we work on a day-to-day basis, it's not really going to work sustainably. Every single department within a business, within an organization, has to be on board in order to achieve the goal. And that starts with the individual. Every single individual can make a massive difference on the bigger scale.
Yeah, it's so true. And Raza has a question for you too. But on that note, I want to go into our first article because we are talking about responsible sourcing. Now, when I was looking into Hermes for a variety of different reasons, I stumbled upon their sustainable development. And through that, I was reading about their responsible sourcing. Now, you said that it takes everybody. You said that it's going to take every single department, but they actually focus very heavily on procurement and how they work with suppliers. So their focus for their long-term development of supply chain and responsible sourcing is focused on biodiversity and climate, and they make sure that their raw materials are natural and renewable. They have a purchasing policy around three principles, which is transparency, high standards, and care. And they have a whole slew of fundamental principles when it comes to relationships with their suppliers. What did you think of this particular? It's not really an article, it's on their website. What did you think about all of this? I thought it was great to be able to showcase what an organization is doing and how they're thinking about it, especially for organizations who might not know where to start.
Exactly. I think it's a really positive move. It showcases from the very outset exactly what they're about, why they're doing it, and also the impact that it has both within their organization, but also within, let's say, the whole FMCG, within fast fashion, that sort of thing. Sustainability, and it's big powerhouses such as Hermes within the fashion industry. Uh, if they are having that conversation, it can only benefit everyone else, as well as the smaller organizations. And again, it comes down to those communications where every single person, business, organization, whatever you may call it within your demographic of a role, has a part to play. And it's really heartwarming to see an organization of this stature, global stature, really leading and pushing forward with sustainability, transparency, and attention to detail, which, as you can see from most of their products, or I've seen in passing, attention to detail is definitely up there. And I'm sure they'll follow it with every part of the business in terms of sustainability.
Yeah, and I want to highlight some of the stats that they've put together as a part of their responsible sourcing strategy, because a lot of times we get, what are the KPIs? What should we be measuring? What does that look like to us? And it should look different to every single organization, but at least this can be a bit of a blueprint if you were trying to do this within your organization, just to showcase what some of the things that they have highlighted. And so they've highlighted a lot of their products being made in France, or at least supplies being sourced in Europe. And then they talk about their social and environmental responsibilities in the supply chain, talking about 85% of direct suppliers formally committed to social, environmental, and ethical policies. So that means that the suppliers that they're working with are heavily, correlated to them in regards to how they're thinking about responsibilities, but also 6.7 million euros of total expenditures dedicated to purchases from socially supported organizations. And so these are just some of their KPIs, which I wanted to point out are not necessarily something that's going to help you in your organization, but gives you an idea of benchmarks of where you can start and what you can start measuring to make sure that you can get there. All right, let's talk about our second article. So we recently did a case study with OSA Commerce and Argents, and we really enjoyed doing this. We love doing a bit of a deeper dive into technology, what it means to e-commerce brands, how it's transforming fulfillment and streamlining operations. So if you haven't had a chance to download this, we put the link in the comments. Go ahead and download this. Prakash, what did you think of this particular article? I know you've been in supply chain for a long time. You have seen the evolution of technology over that time. And this article and this case study really talks about what their tech journey looked like at Argents and where they are now. And I'll show some stats in just a little bit, but I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thanks for pointing out that I've been in the industry for way longer than I would have liked to admit. But yeah, the evolution of technology has just been amazing to see. And in terms of the usage of technology, I think it really comes down to the core fundamentals of the organization and what the business is driving to deliver to its customer bases. Now, if you're a handling agent, you probably have less technology that you need to use because of regulations. Whereas if you're, say, a 2PL, 3PL, you probably need a lot more. But then you have 3PLs, such as the one that I work for, who have different departments: air freight, sea freight, courier, the whole shabazz and everything inside of it, where you need technology in order to simplify the process for all departments, but also to reflect KPIs so we can actually see whether we're meeting their KPIs for our customers, but also the ones that we have set for ourselves in order to better achieve the high standards that our customers expect. But technology is definitely a massive improvement. I think there are some organizations, and I've worked with one or two, where they've only used maybe one software collectively across the entire business. Whereas there are other businesses that have used 3 or 4 different softwares within one individual department. Within operations itself, based in the UK, we've got 3 or 4 different go-to softwares. And it really depends on the ethos of the organization. I find that depending on where their base, their head office really is. So if you're Asia-based, they may prefer to only have one, whereas if you're European-based, you may have 1 or 2, and then have separate conversations around the individual KPIs to bring that together. But I think moving forward, if you can get one platform that can streamline everything for an organization, that just means that you're cutting down on unnecessary usage of suppliers and just coming back to being more sustainable. You have one software, everything runs off that. It's easier to deal with rather than different departments working differently, saying, okay, this software does this, but this software doesn't do that. You have one software, everyone works off it. But again, that's my own personal preference of just having one. It simplifies it.
Yeah, no, I love to hear that, because they actually talked about in this story about how they had disparate systems that weren't talking to each other, and it took them longer to try to get them to talk to each other. And I think that's sort of the conversation that a lot of people in supply chain are having when it comes to technology. But a couple of things that I wanted to highlight is that going to one system actually helped them grow to 30 more customers, and they were customers that they weren't able to service previously, which I thought was really interesting, just because they didn't have the bandwidth, they didn't have the technology, and now that they do, they can also create different revenue streams. And they talked about how their pack table order output went up by 57%. And so previously they would process 650 orders in a 7-hour workday. Now they're processing 1,100 orders. So it just goes to show, when you take a look at the technology and what you have been using and sort of looking to see what's on the market and understanding your tech stack, and if there's too many technologies happening and they're not talking to each other, what that could actually do to your business, and how it could potentially slow that down. Really quickly, before we get to our last article, Raza had a question about SDGs, which I didn't get to, which I had said that I would. Now, I want to point out, Raza, Prakash is not necessarily a sustainability expert, so I'm going to ask the question, but if you can't answer it, it's okay. How do you rate how much percentage of the industries are moving towards sustainability and working on SDG? Like, in your experience, what's that commitment? I feel like there's commitment on websites, but then what's actually happening?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not probably the market expert on such a thing, but I can only give my interpretation based on the facts that I know. Really interesting question, actually. In terms of organizations moving towards it, I think a lot more people are having that conversation. Seeing different weather patterns emerging around the world at the moment is also adding to those conversations, whereas previously it may not have. Yes, there's more conversation. It's more visible on websites within conversations such as we're having, but I think a lot more can still be done.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So Raza, thank you so much for the question. All right, we need to get to the last article before we wrap up because we've only got a couple of minutes. So Prakash, you introduced a short film just a few years ago. Now I want to preface this, right? Because we all come together as supply chain professionals, but really we bring our whole selves to work, right? Holistically. And that means that we are the same person, or should be the same person at work than we are at home. And we all have different challenges. We all have different things that are going on in our lives. And I think for communication, for transparency, for collaboration, we need to get to know each other as a whole. And so, Prakash, a couple of years ago, you came out with a short film. So tell us a little bit about your journey, why it's important, why you want to shed light on this. And I know you've got a couple of launches coming up. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so the video came out in the beginning of 2021, if I'm not mistaken. It feels like a lifetime ago, but it's only a couple of years. And it's just really highlighting to whoever really wants to watch it that we all go through different things. Professionally, but also outside of our professional life. The person who's become a mother for the first time, someone who's getting married for the first time, someone passing, an illness, an ailment, lots of different connotations that people go through on a day-to-day basis outside of work, where we have to manage the emotions, the feelings at work in order to stay professional and to fundamentally do what we've been employed to do. But one topic that doesn't really get spoken about is special needs and disabilities. Now, disabilities is a conversation that's been had within the working environment for many, many years, but not really about carers, especially young carers within the industry. Now, you've got people who have just graduated from college who are carers, starting within the professional industry, such as myself. Many moons ago, we won't go into how many years ago, of being a full-time carer, but also wanting to create a profession that I've wanted to do, that I've studied to get to, which thankfully I've got to where I've wanted to now, and it's now pushing it forward. But at the same time, what's always been happening is I'm still dealing with taking care of my brother and sister, but I'm also seeing my parents getting older, which we all have to deal with, but also within that remit, getting married. So it's a lot of different things that we're juggling, but still turning up to my 9-to-5 job, still going to the meetings, still having those conversations to drive sustainability, to drive operations, to improve it, to grow the business. So for me, it gave me a bit of a release to be able to share the video. The video was my own personal story, which I had never spoken about because I didn't feel that the world was very receptive to such conversations. Since the video went out, there are a lot of conversations that are starting to be had now, but there is a lot more that can still be had.
Yeah.
But it's more about just normalizing the conversation that, hey, we all go through different things. A friend a couple of years ago sadly took his own life, and this is just one of those many different things we all deal with. But at the end of the day, we're still human. We've still got a community, and we've still got people who've got our back. And the biggest help sometimes comes from people that you actually don't even know about.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge and appreciate you for bringing it up, because I think there's a lot of people in your position, whether it's siblings, whether it's parents, and we don't talk about caregiving enough, and the stress, right, of what that does to a person. And I think also to stress that we really want to get to know each other as a community of supply chain professionals. We want to get to know each other. What motivates you? What are you going through? And we want to establish sort of that community feel. So just a few things. You do have a book coming up in 2025. I know we have to go. You have a book coming up in 2025, and part 2 of the short film is coming out as well. So stay tuned for both of those. Prakash, if you can add into the comments where people can find your short film, the first part, that would be great. But listen, thanks so much to everybody for joining us today and bearing with me as I cough my way through Thoughts and Coffee today. And Prakash, all the way from India, thanks so much for joining us on the show.